Alrighty, it looks like it's gonna work, so let's do this. Alright, this is a bit of an intro video. Say hi and give you a bit of an idea about myself. So, welcome to welbot 3D prints. Alright, now as I said, this is going to be a bit of an intro video, give you a bit of an idea about myself, what I've been doing with my life and how I came to be where I am. I've been a 3D artist for about close on 20 years now. I used to make video games and animations for TV shows and so forth. Primarily worked a lot in 3D Studio Max. And earlier this year I bought myself a big resin printer, and it's been quite a journey learning about it. And if this works, hopefully there should be a video coming on the screen showing a little bit of footage of my printer. It's a top-down DLP printer and has an Acer DLP projector which shines down on top of the vat. Currently it's got a 220 by 200 or 220 by 130 by 113. It's got a 220 by 130 by 113 size vat, I believe, off the top of my head. And yeah, basically the build plate lowers down into the resin and projector hardens the resin as it goes down. The reason why I went with this particular printer is not only the build size that you get for the money, but it also has the advantage of being able to print rather quickly, because it has different modes of being able to print. One is sort of standard DLP mode where it shines the light and then it'll dip into the resin, come back up, position itself for the next layer, shine the light, and repeat that process. But it's also got what they call continuous printing mode, and basically it just constantly lowers itself down into the resin while the light changes between the images. And with that method I've been able to successfully print with varying results at speeds of up to about 3 millimeters per minute. Obviously the faster I print, the lower the detail, and you get some more kind of layering effects. But for whipping out a quick concept design, so forth, it's pretty good. But I've got a couple of examples here. This is one of the first things I printed. This one was printed at, I think, about 2 or 3 millimeters a minute. And as you can see, it's quite fine. It's just a model of Thingiverse. I'm not sure off the top of my head who it came from, but this was the very first print that I did, and it didn't quite come out the way that the model looked. I believe it's supposed to have an inside cage as well, but considering I basically just put this into the slicer, sliced it up, sent it to the printer, and this is what came out about 20 minutes later, I was rather pleased. So that's one of the tests I've done. One of the next things that I did was to create my own kind of tolerance tests to see what kind of limitations it had in terms of what it could do. So I created this model in 3D Studio Max and sliced it up, and it's got varying thicknesses of columns and varying thicknesses of holes. I believe this end column here is just less than 1 millimeter thick. I have a couple that have successfully printed even thinner than this one, but the reason I chose to show this one is just because of the nice smooth results, and this one has better looking holes than some of the other ones that I've done. As you can see, the very smallest hole on this side didn't quite come out, but I think that's more due to the curing process than the actual printing, because when it first came out of the printer you could see through the hole, but I think as it's cured, the resin has kind of either dripped inside the hole and cured, or it's actually shrunk a little bit, because some resins do have a tendency to shrink by anywhere up to about 3%, depending on the resin. Or this particular resin can shrink up to 3%. I haven't had many prints shrink very much at all, but yeah, obviously you can see with the very extremely fine details that could potentially be a bit of an issue, but considering the size of the holes that are there, you can probably see it a little bit better with the darker background. I'm actually rather pleased with the results that I was able to obtain from it. So that was another one, and this one was also printed in continuous mode. Then I grabbed a couple more things off Thingiverse, which the maker of the printer actually asked me to grab and just do a few tests of. One is the group model, and this one is kind of a good demonstration of what I was saying about the layering effects. This one was printed at 3 millimeters a minute, and as you can see, has rather visible layer lines pretty much all the way around it. But considering you can see those layer lines, the detail that actually came out of it was quite good. This was sliced, I think, at 100 microns as well. So this one I think took about 20 minutes again, maybe 30 minutes to print. And then I moved on to this elephant, which a lot of you have probably seen before. This one is also off Thingiverse, and again this one was printed at about 3 millimeters a minute, so you can see the visual layer lines. I actually hollowed this one out using Mesh Mixer and put a couple of holes in there to drain the resin from the bottom. This particular one, I believe I printed with one support for one of the feet. I can't remember which one, possibly this one. There was just a little bit of support coming down there, but apart from that there was no support anywhere else on the model, and considering that, I was rather pleased with the way it came out, and considering that was like my third print or something, yeah, I was quite surprised that it turned out the way it did. And from there I started to tweak my processes and experiment with the different modes, and the way my printer works is you can actually move the projector up and down to sort of focus the projection area of it. So if you want to print smaller, finer details, you can shrink the projection area down, and in doing that, this is one of the smaller projection areas that I was able to print something off. Little Eiffel Tower, which probably just about every man and his dog has tried to print at some point. Oh, I don't know if you can get focus on that. But again, this was a very early print, so it's not perfect by any means. It did have little supports, like handrail sort of, not printing supports but actual handrail supports between here, but when I was washing the model off under the tap, they actually fell off because of the pressure of the water. So you do have to be a bit careful when you take them out of the printer and when you're doing the post-processing, but all the same, considering this one was one of my first smaller prints, again I was quite happy with how it turned out. And then later on I moved on to do a much bigger one, and it's kind of bent during the curing process, as you can see. Probably a little bit better from that angle. But this one I printed in a much slower mode. This was done with the standard mode, so I think I sliced it at about 10 microns, and I think it had a layer cure time of about 4 seconds or something per layer. So basically it shines the light for that layer for 4 seconds, and then it dips into the resin, comes back up, shines the next layer for 4 seconds, and so forth. So this one took quite a lot longer, but as you can see, hopefully, one of the handrail supports actually managed to stay. I was a little more cautious with cleaning this one off, but the other 3 sides fell off, unfortunately, and there are supposed to be vertical rails underneath that as well, but they also came out. But again, considering this was one of my very early tests, I'm rather happy with the results. As you can see, the very fine line up the side with the holes through it, so the detail's quite good. And this was printed with fun to do standard blend resin, so it's not what they consider to be a high resolution resin. There are ones that can attain much more detail than that, so considering all that, the results are very pleasing to me. And then with a little more experimentation, I have quite a few other models which I'm not going to bother showing, but I began to experiment with this model recently, which I wanted to print off for my sister. It's an angel with a stormtrooper helmet, a little hole at the top. It's supposed to be like a Christmas decoration, so I wanted to print that off for my sister to get her to put on a Christmas tree. And as you can see, this one has rather big layer lines, and the reason I discovered for that was that depending on the brightness and contrast settings of the printer, the print quality varies quite a bit. So I can take the exact same model sliced at exactly the same Z resolution, And this particular one was printed with a brightness and contrast of 50 each. And then I lowered the brightness to 10 and the contrast to 0. And this was the result. Absolutely perfectly smooth model. I was absolutely gobsmacked by the results. Phenomenal amount of detail, like very little bit of sort of layering effects there, but I think that might be more due to the angle at which it was sitting in the printer. Like it was standing vertically, but because of the way the light builds the layers, sometimes with DLP, if you angle things a certain way, you can actually get varying results with your layer details as well. But this result shocked both me and the maker of the printer. When I told him about the results from this, he was very surprised. He's never tried to print with contrast or brightness settings that low before, and hasn't heard of anybody doing that. But yeah, through varying levels of experimentation, I've got varying results between this one and this one, and kind of documented all the settings, and I'll be posting them up on Facebook at some point to give people a bit of an idea of what settings worked and what didn't. As you can see, it's primarily hollow inside right up to about the head, and from about the head up it's completely solid. And I've found with solid models especially, lower brightness and contrast help phenomenally. When you're dealing with a more hollow shell, like completely hollow shell like the group model, you do need a little bit more brightness and contrast, because I printed off a bigger one, and this one I did with, I think, about 10 contrast and 20 brightness or something, because using the same settings of the 10 brightness and 0 contrast that I used for the other model, that particular print actually came out and it had a big hole sort of up that area of the chest. Most of the rest of the model had formed, but for some reason there was just a hole kind of going up about that far on the model, and the rest of the sort of shell itself was very thin. But yeah, just by pushing the brightness or the contrast up another 10 points, I was able to get that out of it, which I was extremely pleased with. Especially, I'm sure it's a bit smaller, but when you look at the detail and the layering that comes out of the smaller one, it was rather pleasing. These were both printed at the same continuous speed, so I believe it was 3 millimeters a minute, which again shocked me that you could get such different results. This one obviously had a much bigger projection area, but yeah, I was absolutely gobsmacked by the results. So it's a bit more experimentation to come yet, because I've only had the printer a couple of months, but I'm getting there quite nicely, I think. And then the latest one that I've done was another Christmas decoration I wanted to do for my sister because she just loves minions. So I hollowed this one out in Mesh Mixer as well to drain the resin, and I think it's got a 2 or 3 millimeter thick shell, and printed this one out with slightly lower contrast and brightness settings than the Groot one because it was a bit thicker, and I was very pleased with the results. It's a little disappointing on the front, as you can see, but again, I believe that was because on the print bed he was actually kind of angled a bit like that. So as it kind of came out of the resin, it does get layer lines on the top side, whereas the bottom side is very smooth. So even positioning your model on the print bed can vary the results that you get. So yeah, there's more experimentation for me to do in terms of that kind of stuff, but considering these have basically been experiments, I'm quite pleased with the results. So yeah, there'll be a lot more of that kind of stuff to come, and there'll be lots of pictures up on Facebook of things that I post, and I'll be doing videos and all that kind of stuff. I've got a project in the works at the moment because, give you an idea, this is my build plate, which I don't currently have installed, but it's 400 millimeters wide by 400 millimeters long by 220 wide, and it sits in a vat that's about 160 or 170 mil deep, so I can probably print maybe objects of about 140 150 mil high, and obviously as much as I can fit on the bed. So I've got some projects in the works, because the vat that this build plate goes into holds about 13, maybe 15 litres of resin, and one of, I guess you could say, the downsides of printing with resin in a vat like that is over time certain elements of the resin do sink to the bottom if you don't constantly use it. So my print has been sitting unused for a couple of days while I've been preparing certain things and getting ready for Christmas and all that. So no doubt the components of the resin have kind of sunk to the bottom, so you have to stir it. I tend to do that every 2 or 3 days, whether I've been printing or not. Always find it a bit better for consistency, and you can really notice it if you haven't printed for a few days, and when I need to top up the resin with fresh resin, as you pour in the fresh resin, you can see it's got a very opaque look to it, and as you pour it in, you can sort of see it spreading out through the more translucent resin which has been sitting there. So basically I've just been stirring it with a knife, because that's kind of all I've got at the moment. But one of the projects that I've been working on, going to do a practical print, or try to do a practical print, of making one of the old style crank egg beater kind of things. It's going to be completely printed with resin and completely, fingers crossed, assembled with no extra parts, so no metal screws or bearings or anything like that. Never know if it's going to work until you try it. So I've got most of the model done now. I've got all the gears and stuff that I need So I'll be finishing that off sometime over the Christmas break and printing the parts out, and then I'll be doing a video showing the assembly of it, and sort of putting up video to show it working, if it works, as I stir the resin. And I'll also put the model up for people to download once I've tweaked it and sort of made it a perfectly working model. So yeah, that's a little bit about me and what you can expect to come in the future. Hopefully there'll be a few more practical sort of printing applications to come, and I look forward to seeing you all and showing you all what I'm capable of in the future. Thanks for watching. If you like what I'm doing and want to subscribe, give that button a hit. If you've got any questions or anything about the printer or the resin or any part of the process or whatever, drop a comment. You can also reach me on Twitter at the real welbot. So yeah, come in, have a chat, and I'll catch you guys later. Thanks. Bye.